Welcome to the Days of Old Voice, where we dust off the archives to find the truths history tried to hide. When you think of Alaska today, you picture pristine wilderness, massive glaciers, and the 49th star proudly on the American flag. It seems like destiny. It seems inevitable. But the road to Alaskan statehood was anything but a fairy tale. It was a path paved with ridicule. It was secured through intense, smoke-filled backroom lobbying. And most importantly, its admission in 1959 was built upon a foundation of convenient lies and buried secrets. The official story tells us Alaska was welcomed with open arms as a patriotic necessity. The real story is that Alaska was a geopolitical pawn, pushed through Congress by desperate men who hid the true costs of admission. Today, we are peeling back the layers of the 1959 vote to reveal how the last frontier truly became an American state. The frozen joke. To understand the secrets of 1959, we must go back to the beginning. 1867, Secretary of State William Seward signs a check for $7.2 million to Imperial Russia. It amounted to roughly 2 cents an acre. Today, that sounds like the deal of the millennium. But at the time, the American public and press were horrified. They didn't see strategic value, they saw a frozen, useless wasteland. The newspapers coined the scathing nicknames that stuck for decades. Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox. For nearly a century, Alaska wasn't treated as a future state. It was treated as a colonial possession, distant and ignored by Washington, D.C. The Cold War catalyst. So how did a frozen joke become a national priority? The answer lies in fear. World War II changed everything when the Japanese invaded the Aleutian Islands. Suddenly, that useless icebox was the back door to the American mainland. By the 1950s, the Cold War was escalating. The Soviet Union was just across the narrow Bering Strait. The Pentagon realized Alaska wasn't just territory. It was an unsinkable aircraft carrier positioned directly against Moscow. The push for statehood stopped being about mere representation for Alaskans. It became a matter of national survival. The backroom brawl. Despite the military urgency, Congress was still hostile to the idea. Southern Democrats feared adding 2 new senators who might vote for civil rights. Conservatives feared the cost of subsidizing a massive, undeveloped land. This is where the secret history truly begins. A dogged group of Alaskan lobbyists, led by future Senator Bob Bartlett, launched an aggressive campaign. They didn't just make speeches. They worked the dimly lit corridors of power in D.C., trading favors and making promises they knew would be hard to keep. To win over the skeptics, they had to present a sanitized version of Alaska. They had to prove Alaska was American enough and economically viable. To do that, they had to bury the biggest issue of all: the 1959 lies and omissions. When the vote finally passed in 1958, leading to statehood in January 1959, celebrations erupted. But in the rush for stars and stripes, Congress deliberately ignored a ticking bomb: native land rights. For thousands of years, indigenous people had inhabited the vast majority of that land. The Statehood Act conveniently sidestepped who actually owned the ground beneath the new state's feet. Federal officials and lobbyists knew that addressing native claims would kill the statehood bill instantly. So they lied by omission. They pushed through a statehood deal that allowed the new state of Alaska to select over 100 million acres for itself, directly conflicting with native claims. The Backroom Deal was essentially this: grant statehood now to secure military dominance and let future generations deal with the human wreckage of disenfranchised native populations. It took over a decade later, with the discovery of oil, before Congress was finally forced to face the mess they had hidden in 1959. Conclusion and sign-off. Alaska statehood was a monumental achievement, but it was not a pure one. It was born of ridicule, forged in the fear of nuclear war, and finalized through political maneuvering that sacrificed the truth for expediency. If you enjoyed digging past the headlines and uncovering the complicated realities of our shared past, help us keep the archives open. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more stories from the days of Old Voice. Until next time, remember, history is rarely as simple as it looks.